behavior is this? What kind of debased, degraded behavior is this? And especially when none of this harassment, persecution of innocent Kashmiris only because they are Muslim is at all called to account. The Prime Minister is silent, the Home Minister is silent, the BJP President is silent, every BJP Cabinet member is silent. I mean, what the hell is this? Have you lost your humanity totally that you behave like this?
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Are we, the people of India, guilty of repeatedly letting down and failing to fulfill our promises to our brothers, sisters and fellow citizens in Jammu and Kashmir? I'm not just referring to governments, but also to industrialists and even the ordinary Aam Aadmi. That seems to be the core message of an article written by my guest in Saturday's Calcutta paper, The Telegraph. What brings him to this conclusion, and what do we need to do to reverse and rectify this sorry past? Those are the key issues I shall raise today with the well-known and highly regarded historian, author and political commentator Ramachandra Guha. Ram Guha, I want to start by quoting the way you end the article you wrote for the Calcutta paper The Telegraph on Saturday. You said, "It is past time that we begin redeeming promises made by successive governments to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Restoring statehood and doing so immediately is a necessary first step." We know about the promise to restore statehood, which has been reneged upon. But what are the other key promises made by successive governments of the past which have not been fulfilled?
So I think statehood, of course, is the most important, which means that the Chief Minister and the legislature and the local state cabinet have authority and responsibility over all important decisions. But it's also, promises made to promote economic growth in Kashmir through investment, through, then promises in terms of building relationships of trust, reciprocity, respect, so that the Kashmiris, particularly, in Jammu and Kashmir, also there's a difference that in some ways Indian governments have behaved more harshly. Successive Indian governments, Congress and BJP, have behaved much more harshly and sometimes even brutally towards the residents of the Kashmir Valley, and have had a relatively lighter touch when it comes to the residents of Jammu. But just treating them as full citizens of the Republic, giving them dignity, self-respect, honor, and things like that.
Let's for a moment focus on statehood. Not only does the promise to grant statehood go back to 2019, when statehood was revoked, but it's also a commitment made to the Supreme Court in 2023. At the time, the BJP thought or hoped it would win power in Srinagar. That clearly did not happen. So in the new circumstances, do you expect the promise to be honored and kept, or forgotten and discarded?
Karan, before I come to the second part of your question, just recall the circumstances in which statehood was revoked. This was unprecedented in the history of independent India. Several times, union territories had been upgraded to statehood. Goa, for example, Himachal Pradesh, several states in the northeast. This is the first time in our history that a full-fledged state, which actually had constitutional protection, and was joined India under very special circumstances back in 1947, was downgraded. So that itself was shocking and appalling. And people warned at the time it could send a very dangerous precedent. Now, it's now 6 years on. As you say, very soon after Article 370 was revoked and Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh was separated out and Jammu and Kashmir was downgraded to UT status. I recall myself seeing on television the Home Minister make a absolute promise to the opposition that statehood would be restored, quickly. Now it's been 6 years. The Supreme Court has talked about it. Why has it not happened? And there's no sign. I mean, there are a few days for the 6th anniversary, and the movement is kind of mounting for justice to be done in this particular respect. Though justice also has to be done in many other respects we may talk about, justice to the Kashmiris, that is. Now, it appears, if someone who knows how the current regime thinks, that they were very much hoping that whenever elections were held, some alliance in which the BJP was the dominant partner would come to power. I mean, there was a kind of gerrymandering of a constituency so that Hindu-dominated Jammu got several extra seats. There were attempts to float a loyalist king's party called the Apna Party, and then, of course, to promote other kinds of groups different from the National Conference and the People's Democratic Party. And yet, despite all of this, and of course, the media was totally suppressed in Kashmir, not just outside. In Kashmir, the media, which once had a reasonably vibrant and free media, as you will recall, had been totally suppressed. It's been brutalized into submission. Journalists have been harassed, arrested. Journalists and editors, Kashmiri journalists and editors have been harassed, arrested, sent into exile, have had all kinds of cases foisted against them. And despite all of this, it was completely a manufactured narrative that was being promoted in Kashmir. There was gerrymandering of constituencies. There was, an attempt to create a loyalist party. There was massive infusion of funds because the BJP has a great advantage in that respect when it comes to funding elections. And yet they lost. They lost quite substantially, which shows what the sentiment was. Now, any democratic government, any feeling government, any humane government would have recognized that this was the time to grant statehood and rebuild trust. And yet it's been a year and nothing has happened. And as you say, they promised the Supreme Court and there's no sign that, statehood will be restored.
So are you of the opinion that because they signally failed to come to power, they're unlikely to keep this promise? Or at least not in the foreseeable future?
Well, it's very hard to predict. And I would hope that they will keep their promise. I mean, it's clear that they tried all that they could to distort the playing field, to make it biased in their advantage, to win the assembly elections. And when this failed, obviously, both Modi and Shah, both the Prime Minister and the Home Minister are a kind of rather harsh and unforgiving. They have a harsh and unforgiving nature. But maybe the sensible heads will prevail. Maybe they have advisors within the cabinet or, maybe civil servants who understand the situation on the ground will tell them to do so. It's unlikely, but I hope it can still be done.
But in fact, you believe there's something worse that lies behind the Modi government's refusal to fulfill its promise. You write, in everything they have done and not done since August 5th, 2019, the union government has made it manifest that it wants Kashmiris to be submissive and docile subjects, not free and self-respecting citizens. Do you believe it's the intention of the Modi government to subjugate, to dominate the Kashmiri people?
Yes. I mean, it is, and it's of a piece with their intention and desire and effective policy to subjugate and dominate and intimidate and coerce into submission all the Indian Muslims, all the 200 odd citizens of India who happen to be Muslims in origin. I mean, if you look at policies across different states, the so-called bulldozer Raj, the intimidation, the harassment, the lynching, the incarceration of people in Assam, Gurgaon, and other Bihar and other places. So it appears to be a piece by this that they resent the fact that in this case they have, in a more proximate sense, they resent the fact that the Kashmiris have voted for a government they want. And the Kashmiri Muslims have voted, by the way, Karan, by the way, this is very important to recognize, that they have voted for a party that has consistently stood for being fully part of India. The other parties in Kashmir, that have flirted with secession, that have been close to Pakistan, but not the NC. In fact, in the heyday of the insurgency in the 1990s, thousands of NC cadres were killed by jihadi terrorists from Pakistan. Thousands. I mean, the writer Anil Lauria has documented this. How many sarpanches, blockheads, party officials were killed by, thousands of them were killed. So here are NC cadres. You may say it's a dynastic party and have your problems with the Abdullahs, but ordinary NC cadres and local leaders, thousands of them have sacrificed their lives to keep Kashmir part of India, and this is the reward they get.
But the truth, Ram Guha, is that it's not just governments that have made promises to the Kashmiri people which have then been reneged upon. In your Telegraph article, you point out that on August the 12th, 2019, that's also almost 6 years ago, Mukesh Ambani promised to set up a special task force to make a series of investments in Jammu and Kashmir. That hasn't happened. In fact, nothing has been heard about it since that promise was made in 2019. Was it a blatant false promise?
Of course. But you see, if you look at the optics, he is India's most prominent and successful industrialist. He is making a promise that, Kashmir, Article 370 has gone, and the government says we will now make Kashmir fully part of India. And I will show my goodwill towards the government's good intentions and the Kashmiri people by investing thousands of crores and constituting a special task force. Now, nothing has gone. And of course, I think I'm one of the few voices who's writing about this. I mean, the Economic Times and the Business Standard and the Financial Express and should be asking Mr. Ambani this question. What happened to this? Well, of course, they won't, because they're totally complicit and compromised. So this shows that it was obviously it was a promise made to still the waters, to calm the discontent, to say no, actually this is for your economic good. We may have abrogated a constitutional promise we made to you. We may have reduced your democratic rights. We may have downgraded your federal status, but we will uplift you economically by giving you factories and jobs and so on. And of course, none of that has happened.
And another critical institution that's also let down the Kashmiri people is the mainstream media. It ought to be committed to fair and honest reporting. In other words, telling the truth about Kashmir. But as you point out in your article, newspapers suppress reports that show the Modi government in a poor light, whilst television channels actually promote falsehoods. Both of them are letting down Kashmir.
Absolutely. Of course, they're letting down Indian democracy and India as well, in a broader sense. If a media promotes falsehoods, suppresses the truth, is too scared to report the facts on the ground, which is one side of it, so that those are sins of omission. And then the sins of commission, there's like the falsehoods they promote, including most reprehensibly during the recent war with Pakistan, when a very respected cleric in Punch was killed by Pakistani shelling, and our TV media in Delhi claimed he was a jihadi terrorist with absolutely no evidence. To the contrary, he was a respected local, citizen, and there was no apology. There was no chastising by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and the government apparently was willing to let all these pernicious hate instilling falsehoods spread. But I'd say one last thing. So at the same time, Karan, there are some media outlets, usually but not always, based outside Delhi. So I'd single out, in terms of newspapers, the Deccan Herald and the Telegraph. The Deccan Herald in my hometown, Bengaluru, and the Telegraph in Kolkata, which carry, whose local correspondents carry good reports, fair-minded, well-researched, fact-based reports on Kashmir. And then, of course, the digital media websites like Scroll and The Wire, likewise. So, but those are, of course, not, those are all English language. I'm not, I think, in particular Hindi space, in northern India, these falsehoods and pernicious lies are spread about Kashmiris.
But you know what will surprise people is that the truth is even ordinary Indians are guilty of not being fair to Kashmiris. You're right. The Aam Aadmi of Peninsular India have in deplorably large numbers displayed their hostility towards the people of Kashmir. You refer to the way Kashmiri students were abused and fled their colleges after the Pahalgam terror attack. You refer to the lack of gratitude to Kashmiris who displayed exemplary bravery and decency to tourists in Kashmir at that time. You talk about the demonization of Kashmiris in social media and the fact that many Hindus portray Kashmiris as disloyal and unreliable simply because they are Muslim.
Absolutely. And this has gone on for a very long time, and particularly after 2019, after the abrogation of Article 370. You will recall the kind of stuff that Hindutva, so-called influencers portrayed. They would buy land in Kashmir, they will have attractive, awful stuff, Kashmiri women will be, their playthings and that kind of, it's a vile, debased kind of stuff, which was ubiquitous, including, by relatively influential right-wing posters on social media. And after every cricket match with India and Pakistan, Kashmiri students are attacked somewhere in India. That whatever happens, and especially if India loses. And after the Pahalgam attack, on the one hand, the government says this is sponsored by Pakistan, all right, which is which is likely. It's not been authoritatively demonstrated, but given that Pakistan has a track record of sponsoring terror all across India, this is likely. But on the one hand, that is what the government says. On the other hand, in BJP ruled states, in Rajasthan, in Uttar Pradesh, in Uttarakhand, Kashmiri students who are just studying peacefully for engineering, mathematics, medicine, law, are harassed, intimidated, told by their principals to go home. The principal should be protecting them. Go home. Why is the principal telling them to protect home? Because there's a mob frenzy, hatred against Muslims, in this case especially Kashmiri Muslims, because there is a complete breakdown of law and order. So the chief ministers of Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and similar states are not willing to assure the safety and security of completely innocent, upright, law-abiding Kashmiri students. So they have to flee. And there's no sign of any remorse in the ruling party. I mean, this is fine. As far as, Modi and Shah and their fellow MPs and cabinet ministers are concerned. But it's true. It certainly shames us as Indians that when there is a terror attack in Pahalgam, which seems to be orchestrated by Pakistan, and you take it out on ordinary Kashmiris who are not just students. In Mussoorie, a town both of you and I know well, the shawl wearers were made to go overnight. They were just made to go. People peacefully plying their trade, making an honest living, supplying something of beauty and quality and worth to Indians who are not Kashmiris. And the Indians who are not Kashmiris respond to the Kashmiris who are Indians by telling them, get lost, go home. I mean, what kind of behavior is this? What kind of debased, degraded behavior is this? And especially when none of this harassment, persecution of innocent Kashmiris only because they are Muslim is at all called to account. The Prime Minister is silent. The Home Minister is silent. The BJP President is silent. Every BJP Cabinet member is silent. I mean, what the hell is this? Have you lost your humanity totally that you behave like this?
Let me underline something that is so apparent from that answer. Governments, the central government, state governments, particularly state governments in BJP ruled states, failed to stand up and protect Kashmiris who were resident in their states, and it is their constitutional bounden duty to do so. They signally failed to live up to that one single requirement which they are elected to power to fulfill.
One word, from any of these chief ministers would have stopped all of this. One word would have stopped all of this.
Let me ask a broader question at this point, Ram Guha. Why is there this lack of trust and fraternity between Kashmiris and the rest of the country? Is it because it's India's only Muslim majority state and this leads to communal and majoritarian responses from Hindus? Is that what underlies it?
It's much more it's more complicated. That's a large part. It's largely that. But, actually, Karan, we should exult in the fact and glory in the fact that we had till August 2019 a Muslim majority state. And, hopefully we will soon have that again. Because we contrast with our neighbors. I mean, you contrast with Pakistan, which is totally Muslim, in which Hindus and Sikhs have second-class status. In Bangladesh, where likewise Hindus and Christians have second-class status. Here, we have had several Christian majority states in the Northeast, a Sikh majority state in the Punjab, Muslim majority districts in Kerala, a Muslim majority state, even some Buddhist majority parts as in Arunachal Pradesh, and that is our strength and our diversity. And we've lived in a very comfortable way with this from 1947 till 2019, and now to say, and I think this is behind denying them that union statehood, because you don't want to say, just like Hindus, just like Sikhs, just like Christians, Muslims can also have their own state, because having statehood gives them certain protections. If you see how Delhi, being a union territory, is essentially ruled by the central government, and it has the absolute, the elected assembly of Delhi, unless it's of the same party as the party ruling at the center, has no rights, no responsibilities. Sheila Dikshit, I beg your pardon, a large part of what she could do was because the Congress was in power when she was chief minister. And, unless you have a BJP chief minister in Delhi, nothing can be done. So we don't want to give them that status. But this is what made us special and strong, that our unity was based on a respect for pluralism. It was based on a sense that every citizen, every part of India counts equally, regardless of its religious configuration and regardless of which party is in power.
Ram Guha, there was a hint in that answer that prompts me to bring up something I didn't bring up earlier, but I will bring it up now. Is statehood being denied to the Kashmiris because they are majority Muslim and because it's a message that resonates with the Modi government's Hindu support base? After all, there are gruesome acts of terror in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Orissa, but no one would even dream of stopping their statehood. And yet, in a flash of a moment, we did precisely that in Jammu and Kashmir. Is it because they're Muslim?
That's what it appears. But I said, I am a biographer of Mahatma Gandhi, so I believe that even evil people have some good in them. They can be redeemed. It's on their own. I'm quite clear that Narendra Modi and Amit Shah will not grant statehood to the Jammu and Kashmir because the BJP lost the last state elections because the population is still majority Muslim. But it could be that there are other people in the cabinet who are sensible of what is right, what is just, what will redeem India in international opinion. All of this shames us in the court of world opinion too. So I would still hope, maybe carry some element of hope, maybe against experience, to quote, Samuel Johnson. It may be a triumph of hope over experience to expect that after all of this statehood would be granted, but it was still, it should be done. Whether it would be done, I cannot answer. I'm not privy to the inner workings of this government, but it should be done for political and moral reasons. And finally, Karan, even if it is not done, my article in the Telegraph and my conversation with you is addressed not merely to the government, but to our fellow citizens, so that they at least find a way of treating Kashmiris with honor, with respect, with dignity, with equality, and with justice.
There is a thin sliver of hope but it reminds me of Nadezhda Mandelstam's biography of her husband, the poet Osher Mandelstam. She called it Hope Against Hope.
Absolutely. Hope against hope. That's it.
And truly, there was very little hope there. But let me ask you a slightly different question. To what extent are Kashmiris treated harshly or poorly because of the way they have been perceived to treat the Pandit community? And is that an explanation for the way they're treated? And secondly, is it a fitting justification for the way they're treated?
So, Karan, that's a very good and important question, a very pertinent question, but I'll have to answer it at some length, if you permit me. Give me a couple of minutes. So, in 1989-90, in that winter, and through the following year, through 1990, estimates vary, but at least a couple of lakh Kashmiri Pandits were made to leave the valley, were forced to flee the valley. It was an act of ethnic cleansing. Now, the principal actors were jihadis from across the border, but the local population, the local Kashmiri Muslims, were quiescent. Some may have been complicit, the large bulk were quiescent. They didn't actively oppose the expansion of their Pandit brethren. Now, however, after the dust died, what was happening in 1990 was, 89, 90, 91, was Hindus were being persecuted and harassed and expelled in Kashmir. But in other parts of India, because of the Ahmadiyya movement, Muslims were at the receiving end of persecution and prejudice and violence. Now, at the same time, there arose a conspiracy theory that it was Jagmohan, who was then the governor of Jammu and Kashmir, who told the Pandits to leave. Now, this is totally false. And the writings, particularly of the very brave writer Sonia Jabar, who was there at the time, debunked this, that the Pandits fled, but they were harassed and persecuted, and the local population of Muslims did nothing. So in some ways they were complicit, right? There's no question about that. But it is now 35 years. Now compare what happened to Kashmir in 89-90 with what happened to Delhi in 1984. Thousands of innocent Sikhs were butchered by Hindu mobs led by Congress politicians. Do we still hold that against the ordinary Hindu of Delhi 40 years later? Do we say, do we say you are always guilty? You will always be in the dock? We will not give you trust and self-respect? Move forward to 2002. Thousands of Muslims were butchered in those riots in which the state administration and the ruling party was totally complicit and actively, some elements actively aided it, and the Hindus of Gujarat were silent. They allowed it to happen. Should we say the Hindus of Gujarat should now become a union territory because of the way they persecuted Muslims in 2002 and now and since? What kind of retributive action would that be? So it's 35 years on. The bulk of the Kashmiris who are alive today have no memories of what happened in 1980. They're absolutely not responsible. And although belatedly, the leaders of Kashmiri public opinion, such as Omar Abdullah, Mehbooba Mufti, and the Mirwais, have expressed contrition and sorrow and apologized for what happened to their Kashmir Pandit brother in 1990. So, but I think among the Hindu consciousness, or at least the pro-BJP Hindu consciousness, this sentiment that because the Pandits were expelled in 1990, Kashmiris still today should not get any respect. They must be punished. They must be harassed for what happened in 1990. Even though they personally, the people in Kashmir today had nothing to do with it. This sentiment is there. It's promoted by propaganda films, funded and by the ruling regime, endorsed by the ruling regime. But it would be morally wrong. As I said, the analogy would be, should we, by the same token, downgrade Gujarat into a union territory?
I take your point.
That is really what it is. Yeah.
I want to end by quoting once again the last sentence of your Telegraph article. You write, "We shall have to do much more to make Kashmir and Kashmiris feel properly and honorably part of the Republic of India." This is clearly more than just a commitment to our shared nationhood, it's a moral imperative. But what are the sort of steps and measures you have in mind?
So I think I already outlined them. I mean, I'm an ordinary citizen. I have no power. I have no authority. Mine is an appeal to the government. It's an appeal to my fellow citizens. First, to restore statehood. Second, to find ways of generating jobs within Kashmir. In my article, I talk about how thousands of educated and bright young Kashmiris have to flee the valley because there's no dignified employment. Thirdly, just overcome this bigotry and religious prejudice and recognize the Kashmiris as being as Indian as you, even though they may belong to a different religion. But there's beyond a moral imperative, there's also a geostrategic imperative. Karan, in the wake of the Pahalgam attacks, the government sent all these delegations. It had absolutely no impact. The whole world still says it's a disputed territory. Kashmir is a disputed territory. The only supporter we may have, who knows, is possibly, God knows, maybe Israel, which is not the kind of support you want to have because of what the genocide that the Israeli state is committing in Gaza. So we lost this perception, our government lost this perception battle because of the fact that it is now well known that the Modi Shah regime has not treated Kashmiris as equal citizens before and after 2019, regardless of what happened on that day, on 5th August. So even from a geostrategic point of view, if India wants to convince the world that Kashmir belongs legitimately to India and it is not a territory disputed between India and Pakistan, the most sensible, logical, constructive, and effective way of doing this would be to treat Kashmiris as full and equal citizens, to grant them statehood, to find ways of promoting economic growth, to get in the valley, to get not just Mukesh Ambani, but other people to invest and to promise them security. And of course, to restore a free press, to make, as I said in my article, July 13th a holiday again, because it means so much to the ordinary Kashmiri. All these symbolic and substantive gestures substantive gestures and actions must come not just from the government, but from our fellow citizens. And then we can say Kashmir is truly part of India and Kashmiris feel truly part of India and respected by India.
Ram Guha, thank you very much for the time you've given me, and thank you very much for this very forceful cry that we need to recognize we have been unfair and unjust to the Kashmiris, and time has come to rectify and remedy this sorry past. Take care, stay safe.
Thank you, Karan.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.